Hello and welcome to another episode of Faith Stories, Saints, Sinners, and Spicy Takes. I am your host, Reverend Kathleen McMurray, joined today by the wonderful Reverend Jake Clark.
Kathleen and I are both pastors at Pulaski Heights United Methodist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas. And we are so happy to be with you today on this second Faith Stories, Spicy Takes.
Faith Stories is a podcast where we are taking a look at stories and people from history, good, bad, and ugly, and drawing out lessons for life and faith. We hope to learn some new things about history, have some fun and laughs, and discover deeper meaning for our faith. We hope that you will learn and discover deeper meaning as well. So today we are talking about the great war hero and champion of the cross, Charlemagne, a.k.a. Charles the Great, a.k.a. Charles the First.
Or Chuck, as we knew him back in the day.
So Jay, when did you first become familiar with old Chuck?
Two different stories. I learned about Charlemagne through world history in junior high, I believe, but then when I was in high school, I did a production of the Stephen Schwartz musical Pippin,
yes,
which I wanted the part of Charlemagne, but didn't get it. I had to play his son Louis. And so, and with all musical theater things, I mean, it is just a hint of truth in the way that they develop that character. But there, as I've seen in some of the research I've done, there are certainly some similarities.
Actually, my experience is very similar to yours. I mean, I knew of the name of Charlemagne for sure, but it was not until I was in a production of Pippin in high school that I really did learn about him. I was an overachiever, so even though I was a featured dancer, I did all sorts of really intense research about the history. And yeah, similar to what you said, learned there's some truth and there's some liberties, and it's a good musical. So Jay, you are currently, though, playing Charlemagne in Pippin at the Argenta Theater. So your research has probably been even better. So why don't you give us some highlights?
The musical Pippin follows the life of Pippin, which was Charlemagne's first son. In reality, this first son, born to Charlemagne's first wife, was a hunchback. He was referred to as Pippin the Hunchback. Charlemagne really got around. I guess that's the spicy take on this one. He had many wives and many children by other women as well. One of his wives he did have 9 children with, and one of those was Louis. But so anyway, you take all these characters and you find the best ones and you put them in a musical, and who doesn't just start singing and dancing when, things get heightened in the world. But anyway, so Charlemagne is trying to take over, trying to spread Christianity throughout the world, throughout the kingdom. And he's been meeting with the Pope. That's all factual. He and the Pope were close. It was Pope Leo III, I think, that made Charlemagne the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire.
Yes.
And they hadn't had an emperor in 3 centuries. And rumor is that if Charlemagne had known the Pope was going to do that, he would not have accepted it. I don't believe that, because I think he was kind of full of himself. But anyway, he ruled for almost 15 years, I guess, and then he did the coronation of his son Louis to take over from there.
Okay.
But yeah, so time-wise, Charlemagne was born in the 740s. Some say 742, somewhere around in there. He was king of the Franks first. He had a sword that was called Joyous, and you can see it at the Louvre. But they have it, and it was a coronation sword. But he wore it, said to have magical powers and all this. Very remind me of Excalibur.
Right.
But the sword is there, and it's said to shine brighter than the sun, so it would blind the people that it was coming toward. But he certainly thought that he was doing the Lord's work,
yes,
by killing those who were non-Christians and forcibly converting those who didn't want to die.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I heard or read that he was called the father of Europe and known for uniting Europe, which as you dig into that history, seems to be a very nice spin on Christianizing to the point of death.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fun fact, he also had an elephant. I don't know where that plays into any of this. He had an elephant. I mean,
like a pet elephant?
Yeah.
Huh.
And I guess he would ride the elephant. I don't know.
Well, maybe that goes back to that whole ego thing.
Maybe.
Right? Like,
everybody needs to ride an elephant at some point in time.
If I can't get enough wives, I'll just get an elephant. That'll make things
right.
Better.
And something else that our listeners should know is that the Holy Roman Empire at that time was France and Germany and northern Italy and in some of the Low Countries that are in. It was really a Western piece of Europe, and so that was his focus, so to speak.
So tell us a little bit about. There's a song in Pippin, and we're not. I know you said before we started recording that you didn't want to turn this into like
a musical theater podcast. But if you're interested, please let us know.
But yes, Jay and I both have a history with that. Clearly, we were both in the musical Pippin. But talk a little bit about there's a song, and you've told me a little bit about the song "War is a Science" that's in the musical, and I know it's been rewritten and revised. Talk a little bit about that and about kind of the historical perspective of that idea of war, and like what that looked like for Charlemagne.
Yeah, when Stephen Schwartz first wrote the musical, he wrote it in college at Carnegie Mellon, and they were going to do it as a student theater production. And when he kept working on it, he also has said that none of what was written in the late 60s made it to what eventually was on the stage in 1972.
Okay.
Bob Fosse directed it, great choreographer and director. Really, when they started marketing the whole Pippin thing to community theaters and regional theaters, a lot of the Fosse stuff didn't necessarily make it, but people have added it in as an homage to Bob Fosse and his particular style of dancing. War is a Science is the song that, it's the best song in the show. And not really, but it is the most, I think it's the most fun. But he goes on, he's explaining to his troops what his style of battle is. Charlemagne didn't have a formal education, but people, he knew how to win these battles. And he would draw them out and could explain it. And, there's this whole verse around taking enfilade and defilade in mind. And, people are like, what's enfilade and defilade? And it's like, the number of people that you kill versus the number of people that are killed on your side. So, but the lyrics were changed in the 2013 revival, Broadway revival. And they were so mean. The words were just so mean. So, and I didn't like the words of the new.
What do you mean by mean?
Well, not to get political.
Oh.
when he rewrote the words, it was during the time of maybe the Iraq War.
Okay.
And so he used direct quotes from Donald Rumsfeld in rewriting some of the lyrics.
Okay.
And so it really became more. In the original, it was kind of, Charlemagne sang it with a wink and a smile, and it wasn't just about, ripping the guts out of somebody.
Right.
The new lyrics, I wish I'd brought a copy of them, but they were just mean. And so I emailed Steve Schwartz, and I said, are you still satisfied with the lyrics that you wrote, for the revival? I would really like to use the original lyrics. And he wrote back and said, it's not really as timely now as it was then.
Oh, wow.
And he said, so, you can mix and match the lyrics if you want, just don't screw up the rhyme scheme.
Wow.
And I thought, great, and so that's been fun. I found that I use the original lyrics because they're fun to sing. I remembered it from when I did it 35 years ago.
Right.
And there's a line that says, When the foes see our soldiers marching through the lee, they will mount a charge and meet us at the point I've labeled B. And the bowmen on the hill in yellow on the map will leave their post and join the rest and fall into our trap. And we'll cut off reinforcements and retreats of any kind, bearing principles of enfilade and defilade in mind.
Okay.
And if all the points we pick to really work to bring to pass occur, we won't have just a victory, we'll have ourselves a massacre. And it's really a Gilbert and Sullivan type of, if you're familiar with modern major general, from Gilbert and Sullivan, it's kind of a patter song. Mm-hmm. This whole song sets up Pippin going into battle.
Okay.
They win the battle, and of course they want to pillage and, take everything and have their way with dead bodies, as was the custom in war. And Pippin finds out then that he really doesn't want to be a soldier.
And I think that that's an important, when we think about Christendom and when we think about figures like Charlemagne, he was certainly not the only one that was part of the movement of Christendom that sought to convert through killing, massacring, conquering. And I think that that's an interesting kind of way that Stephen Schwartz kind of read that and brought that into the musical, a perspective that's less traditional, the glorification of Christendom in that way. And I don't think it's a spicy take necessarily now to say that that's not exactly a good way to do faith. But I think that his evolution and his thinking through the lyrics of that song and the ideas of war as portrayed even in this fictional telling of Charlemagne is a good example of how we evolve and think about things in a really messy history of Christianity, if we're being honest.
There's a really great book out called The Evangelism of Charlemagne. I just made that up. It really doesn't exist, but it'd be a good, it'd be a short book. There's also a line that Charlemagne tells to his sons that kind of sums up who he is. He says, the Pope and I have said that we are going to spread Christianity throughout the kingdom, even if we have to kill every non-Christian to do it.
Wow. Do you think that even though we can agree mostly, and this comes into our kind of, why should I care segment at the end of our podcasts, as we're looking at history, as we're thinking about the evolution of our understanding of conversion and our kind of general acknowledgement that killing off people that aren't Christian so that we will have a 100% Christian state is not perhaps an actual Christian way of going about things. We can kind of agree on that. But do you think that I think there's still complexities, I guess what I'm trying to say, in how we understand converting, how we understand evangelism, how we understand talking about Christianity, where we can maybe all agree that it's not good to kill people, or at least many of us agree that it's not good to kill people, but that there's other levels of the way that we just treat and understand and view people outside of Christianity, that there's still a lot of work, I think, that needs to be done.
Right. And I think part of that goes to, what is your worldview? We're located in Little Rock, but I grew up in a small town it was all Christian houses of worship. If you were Jewish or Muslim, you had to drive 30 minutes to get to your place of worship. And I did not grow up with anyone else outside the Christian faith.
Right.
Of course, there was also a time in a small town that if you were to identify even as a non-Christian, it was, even if you were an atheist,
right,
or were not practicing, you just didn't talk about it. And then when you experience life with a lot of other people that are different than you, I've always thought that it just makes your life that much richer.
Right.
Because I've got a lot of friends who are different faiths, and, believe it or not, we find a lot of things we agree on. Sometimes we do talk about the things we disagree about, and that's okay. They're not trying to change me, and I'm not trying to change them. But I think there are more similarities than differences for a lot of us.
And I think one of the things that we know in our faith is, or that we who profess to be Christian at least profess to believe in, is the power of humility. And that there's something to be said as we are listening to the stories, listening to the faith, listening to the beliefs of others, that when we approach things with humility, I think that God and the Holy Spirit can open us up to new understandings of God and faith when we listen with humility, rather than believing that we know what is right, and believing that we always know what is right, and that we would be better off if we were to conquer in that way that Charlemagne certainly did. So, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience as we kind of wrap up our time today, Jay? Tell us first of all, where we can come and see Pippin, see Charlemagne in action.
It's the Argenta Community Theater in North Little Rock, Arkansas. And we run August 18th through the 28th. And there's actually a gala performance on the 17th featuring the original leading player from Pippin.
Oh, how fabulous.
Ben Vereen will be in town with us. So we're excited about that. And you can see clips of Pippin on YouTube. It was filmed in Ontario, maybe 1980, with Ben Vereen in the original cast, and John Rubinstein as Pippin, who he had played him on Broadway, and Martha Ray plays Bertha in the film version.
Okay.
Anyway,
well,
again,
awesome.
if you're interested in that musical theater podcast,
let us know. But also let us know if you have other ideas for topics and persons that you'd like for us to discuss, questions about history, about faith. We would love to get your feedback and input as we continue to grow this podcast. Again, this is only the second time we've done this, and so we appreciate you listening. You can email us at podcast@phumc.com. And you can also follow our church and ministries here and get lots of other food for thought at our Facebook page for Pulaski Heights United Methodist Church, and Instagram at PHUMC Hillcrest. Also, at the end of every session, we wanted to share a historical quote, and we'd love for you to send us some fun ones to that email. But I wanted to share our historical quote for today. As we are filming this, we are finishing up the Olympics in Tokyo. And so as we were filming this, a historical quote that I came around that I just thought was beautiful and inspiring was from Mary Lou Retton, who I was absolutely obsessed with as a child. American gymnast and 1984 gold medalist, who said, "As simple as it sounds, we must all try to be the best person we can by making the best choices, by making the most of the talents that we have been given." And so I thought that was really inspirational as we move forward to the start of the school year, as we think about how we are to try and engage in the world. And as we think about that, I just thought it was really inspirational.
And, this is a whole nother podcast, but, good for you, Simone Bowles.
Yes, Simone Biles. Yeah.
Biles. And
absolutely.
For that quote reminds me that, people need to take care of themselves too. And,
yes.
And so I was, it had to have been hard for her to make that decision, but she did what was best for her and what she thought was best for her team.
Yes.
And so kudos to her for putting a spotlight on that and saying it's okay.
And supporting mental health. Yes. That's huge.
Faith Stories, Saints, Sinners, and Spicy Takes is brought to you by Pulaski Heights United Methodist Church in Little Rock. Our engineers are Jacob Nolan and Patrick Jones. Our producer is Michael McMurray. I'm Jay Clark.
I am Reverend Kathleen McMurray. See you back next month. Bye.